I looked at the death records for, I think it was 1940, for the whole U.S. And I was able to find, with the census, one of the questions they asked was whether you were hooked to the grid. So I looked at the cities, and I looked at state by state for all the deaths, and I compared those that had the grid and those that didn't. And there's just amazing differences, which have all disappeared since the mid-50s, when the rural areas finally caught up to the urban areas in terms of electrification. And there's a paper in on my website about this. It's historical evidence. In fact, I'll go look it up at my father. And if you look at state by state, place by place, you find that all causes death rates were much higher in the electrified area. The cancer rates and everything else was, except one cause of death, and that was auto accidents. That was no different in electrified and non-electrified area, which made people.
So Sam, are you saying that basically that all of these illnesses since the electrification of this country is related to electricity?
Absolutely. And wouldn't it really surprise me? Well, you know, I go back to childhood leukemia. I figured, hey, look, if we figure this out, we can figure everything out. So there's a study on my website about childhood leukemia, and we showed that that's strictly electrification caused. The kids are at age 2 through 4. Their mothers got exposed, or they got exposed. And you still don't see it in places without electricity. And the one that really surprised me was suicide. That's an EMF disease. And if you looked at rural areas in that study, they just didn't have it in the unelectrified areas until they electrified. Like if you looked at the Northeast, which is first electrified, it had all the causes, the cancers, diabetes, heart disease. Heart disease is another interesting one. That's another EMF disease. Who would believe it? I couldn't get the stuff published. I had to publish it in European papers.
So tell me, what is the resistance? We've had resistance to asbestos and asbestosis, to cigarettes and the cause of lung cancer from cigarettes. And we've had with the oil industry and the fracking and all the toxic chemicals and their resistance. And I mean, it builds up a case that industry seems to have our government agencies bought and sold, or what is it? I mean, you worked as a public health physician.
I think all that stuff is, it varies so much from place to place. The one thing that doesn't vary from place to place is electricity. And there's no absent to that. If you look country by country, or when wars happen, like the death rate dropped in Cuba when the Russians pulled out their money, and the countries in Europe that got occupied by the Nazis, everybody said, well, it's due to caloric restriction. Hell no, it's due to the fact that they weren't working and electricity production was way down. Now, unfortunately, everything is caused by electricity.
So
you asked about resistance. I think there's probably, like any other carcinogen, some people are a lot more resistant than others, probably genetically. But I don't think we're that resistant anymore, because the ground current has been going up forever. And this year might be an exception, but the last 3 years were the first, or were the rarest times that we've had an increase in death rate and a drop in longevity for the whole population of this country. And I've written to the people who collect that data, and they haven't responded.
Well, that's probably not a surprise. So you called your book Dirty Electricity. Many of us do not understand that term. Could you explain what it is?
Well,
how is it different from electricity, or are they the same, and how does it harm us?
Well, electricity in this country is 50, 60 hertz alternating, and it's a nice clean sine wave if you look at it on an oscilloscope. In Europe, it's 50 hertz, and their grid's different than ours in that all return current goes back through the wires. In this country, all the electricity used to go back through the wires, but World War II was the first wireless exposure radar, was developed in radar ranges, etc. Now, I mean, the computer I'm sitting on here it's a DC, runs on direct current, and yet it's being fed with alternating current, and it's got a little gizmo in there which changes the AC to DC. Well, those things put out dirty electricity. What they do is they corrupt the sine wave. If you look at the sine wave in a dirty house, it's got all kinds of crap writing on it that's not present in a clean house. So electricity isn't clean, but it's dirty. Electricity is dirty in that it's got all sorts of harmonics and other frequencies riding on the stuff that's being delivered by your utility. And you don't pay for it either. And you were making it. The utilities don't make it. They make 60 cycle AC. But all the radar range, the computer, the routers, and the wireless cell phones, all that stuff corrupts the return current. And in this country, that means that the stuff going back to the substation is a lot dirtier than when it came, because it was clean when it came and we dirty it up. And unfortunately, the problem with solar, if you're connected to the grid, solar and wind power give you dirty electricity because they've all got the inverter. And every house I've been in with an inverter has got dirty electricity. And if it's solar, it's when the sun's up.
So are you saying that in spite of the fact that solar is a clean energy from the fact that we bring it in from the sun, we're being exposed through the inverter to dirty electricity, and that can be harming our health
Absolutely.
if our batteries are in our house?
Absolutely. And I've cleaned up a lot of solar houses. It's the only way to fix it is to run DC systems. In other words, have solar, batteries, and you can run most of the stuff we run on DC. And I can't afford it here, but if I had enough dough, I'd do it right now. It's not very sunny up here. Whereabouts in New Mexico are you?
I'm in New Mexico, so
Right.
I'm northeastern. I'm south of Taos and east of Santa Fe in a box canyon.
Oh, good.
So I have lots and lots of sun. Actually, I had to move my computer because the sun was coming in so strongly. And this is just a small amount of sun. It's washing me out. But
You've got a clock back there ticking away behind you.
uh-huh.
I can see
Yeah.
it. Tick tock, tick tock.
So
You're Washington.
let
It's
me
been
go
raining
ahead.
every day.
Oh, yes, I've been hearing. I was in Oregon for a while, and I've been watching their weather as well. So is there any difference in terms of if we have a buried electrical line versus one that's overhead? Does that matter at all? Is there any health savings? Does it help us? Does it just create more electrification of the earth? I mean, what would you talk a little bit about that?
The buried power lines don't put any electricity in the earth because they do. You get the same exposure by distance. So if you're sitting or standing on a buried power line, you're getting exposed just like if it's overhead, only you're closer to it. But the great advantage of buried power lines is people don't crash into the telephone poles that carry them. That's a huge advantage. And they don't wash out, and they don't get blown down. Like every year since I've lived here, out in the sticks with all those woods around here, we've lost power. And once we lost it for 2 weeks, that's bad on your freezer.
Well, it's bad on the freezer, but good on one's health if we're not relying upon refrigerated food. But so there's no advantage. In fact, if we're walking on a buried power line, we're being exposed more greatly because usually they don't bury them more than 3 or 4 feet.
Exposure to power lines is a matter of distance. If you're
Okay.
far away from it, you're okay. If you're close to it, it's no good.
Okay. So, we've had electricity for 150 years almost.
Yeah.
We've grown up with it. It's ubiquitous. It's what we've normalized it into our lives. And every technology that has been built since then has been built upon it. And so today we have a whole new kind of we have this birth of wireless that everybody has access to. It's not just limited to radar from World War II. And so we have the wireless technologies. So how are the wireless technologies, the radio wave frequencies, and the electromagnetic frequencies from wires, how are they similar and how are they different? And how do they impact us?
The difference in how they expose you, the worst exposure is cell phone, because you put the thing up against your head. I mean, I've never ever put the thing against my ear. It's always out here for the briefest time I can do it. And I only use it for emergencies. And I think that's smart. You see people in airports, planes, buses, they're just staring at their goddamn at their cell phone. Pardon the curse, but that's what I think about them. It's a function of frequency. And you can measure frequency with an oscilloscope or other devices. And they forced wireless into schools, and it's terrible. I mean, it just makes people sick. It kills people. But nobody is wised up to that.